Hello all, Christina here. I'm editing this video at home. We're back from Hawaii now, and I have a little bit of a head cold, or not even a little bit. I'm on the tail end of it, but it's still pretty bad, and that's why it's taken me some time to get this video up because I didn't have a voice for a few days there. So here we are. This is my very first card that I made while in Hawaii, and it turned out to be my favorite of the entire bunch that I made. And as you can see at the beginning of the video, I had a little sketch there. I had a plan for this card, and after I got into the watercoloring, I kind of veered off my plan because I loved the watercolor background so much. So I'm actually going to have another video that's right after this. I'll put it up in a few days where I go back to that original idea. So then this video and the one after it are going to look very similar. The cards will look similar because it was the same session of making these cards, but I didn't want to speed through either one of them. I wanted them to be separate videos because I think they warrant their own video. So here we are. So I started out by taping down a piece of watercolor paper to a watercolor board. This is Strathmore watercolor paper. It's the pre-cut 5x7 cold press. And I taped that to a board with some blue painter's tape. I first wet it with quite a bit of water. And then I started coming in with just 3 colors of watercolor paint. This is my Magello Mission Gold watercolor. And I use this nice, I think it's their opera pink color, a lemon yellow, and then, I'm not even sure what this blue is, but they were the closest colors that I thought were to like a CMY for cyan, magenta, yellow, because I know, and I've said this in the past and even in recent videos, when you mix those 3 colors together, you get the most bright, vibrant rainbow shades. So that's exactly what I'm doing. At this point, I'm just dropping in color in all these different areas. I am trying to swirl my brush a little bit to get those colors mixing. Like here, I added a little more of that pink to my brush and came in over the blue, but they weren't really mixing and making new colors like I had hoped they would. Now I am picking up my board and moving it around, but it's really not encouraging the colors to mix too much, so I knew I needed to add more water. So I grabbed my distressed sprayer bottle and I just spritzed the whole painting piece a couple of times to get a little more water on there, and that encouraged more of the color to start moving. And because I have it tilted, things started moving. Now this really reminded me of when I used my distressed reinkers to paint with. It really reminded me of that. And I think, it just tells me in my mind, as long as you have really concentrated watercolor, you can get a similar effect. So I used my heat tool to speed up the drying process. And not only does it speed up the drying, but it stops the colors from moving. I thought this background was really pretty, but I wanted to add more intense color right on top. So I came in and started doing like swirly shapes, very kind of abstract shapes, not anything too precise. And I wanted to just have a layer of color. And because these watercolor paints are very transparent, it's going to let a little bit of that color underneath show through. And it also gives me an opportunity to get more saturated areas. And I wanted to have these colors touch each other just a little bit so I could get a little bit of that orange shade going. And as I bring in this blue, I'm going to bring it in over the top. Some of the color changes that I got on the first layer, I really loved. So I didn't want to cover those up completely. But I did love how this second layer of color really got some more intensity on there, and it made it very abstract. It started to look a little bit almost like a galaxy to me, but not really. But I loved how the colors were mixing right on top. I'm going to come in with a little more of that pink, just trying to get these colors to move around a little bit more. And at this point, I thought, oh no, are we getting mud? Am I adding too many colors? So I decided that I was just about done. I'm just going to add a little bit more in this bottom corner. And this little swirl here I'm going to do is one of my favorite parts of the finished painting, oddly enough. So I'm glad I included it. It's this little kind of swirl I'm going to do here at the end with some pink right there through that purple. And I love that little squiggle right there down at the bottom. So once again, I'm going to hit this with my heat tool. It's looking a little bit like a hot mess at this point. I'm not going to lie. I wasn't loving it at this point. And I thought, is there a way to salvage this? It's not my favorite right now. And I thought, you know what? Let's put some gold splatter on it. So I've got my Christmas set of Yuli watercolors. I'm going to use the Christmas gold shade. And so I just got a bunch of that paint wet and let that water seep into the pan. And then I protected my work surface with some paper towels. And I used an acrylic block to put that paint on the edge, and then ran my paintbrush off the edge of the block, and that splatters the paint down onto my painting. I like to use an acrylic block because I feel like I have a little bit more control over where those splatters go. And I think I get a little bit of a better result, and I don't get like paint all over my fingers, which is kind of nice. I really loved that big splatter right there in the center. So in the end, I will go through and add some, splatter spots that I painted on myself instead of having it splatter. But I really love how all of these splatters turned out. And once I added the gold on there, I decided that, I kind of really dig this background. It looks really great. I love how it turned out. Once I added the gold on there and I put in some more little dots for splatters, it doesn't really read galaxy to me because of the gold instead of maybe like a white star splatter. But it does add just enough of that shimmer that I really like how it turned out. But, I was really skeptical there for a bit. So at this point, I decided, okay, I can't cover up this background with what I had planned to do before. So I'm going to leave it just like this and do a greeting. So I've got my little tiny die cutting machine from Honeybee, and I'm going to be using some, this is the assortment pack of glitter paper from Simon Says Stamp. And I pulled out the gold sheet. I'm going to be cutting out this big scripty hugs die. And I'm running that through right here. And this is a good time to note that that ring I'm wearing is my travel ring. I actually found a ring on Amazon that looks almost like my real wedding ring set. And so I thought, you know what, this is going to be great for travel. So I actually bought a set of rings, or just a ring, that I could wear when I travel. So that's why the ring looks different in these next few videos. So I cut the hugs die out of the gold glitter paper. I also cut it out of white cardstock 3 times. And then the halo piece I cut out, or the shadow piece, I cut out of white. And this is the 110 pound solar white cardstock that I use all the time. So I applied some dots of glue to all 3 of the white hugs pieces, and then I was able to stack these. I like this method of stacking intricate dies like this because it goes really, really fast and it's not too time consuming. So I got those 3 layers put together first, kind of used my fingers to move them around, and then I picked up that 4th and final layer. So after I had all of these layers all combined, I then glued this piece right here. I put that on the shadow layer. And I really wanted to stack these up because this card doesn't have a whole lot going on besides that background. So I wanted to have a substantial greeting that really finishes off the card. This would also be a great card to do some die cutting out of, like a big, huge heart or something like that. But I decided I wanted to use as much of that background as possible. So I put a couple acrylic blocks on top to dry, and then I worked on the secondary greeting. Now I'm going to use the Tiny Words stamp set from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm going to use this method for creating a tiny text strip that Jennifer McGuire shared in a recent video. And one of the ways she showed was that you could stamp your greeting on some grid paper or scrap paper in your MISTI, put this template guide over the top, and then put your sentiment strip inside. So I've got a piece of pitch black cardstock from Hero Arts on the inside of this template. I've prepped it with an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to be stamping my greeting in Versamark ink. And this is because I'm going to be heat embossing, so using a sticky ink like Versamark is perfect. So I'll stamp down that greeting right onto the black sentiment strip, and then I can sprinkle some white embossing powder. This is some detail embossing powder from Simon. And then tap off the excess and hit it with my heat tool. I'm going to set that aside while I peel off the tape off my background. And I love this feeling of peeling off the tape, that nice crisp white border. Unfortunately, I'm going to be cutting off that white border, even though I loved it. And I only have my little trimmer here. It's a smaller trimmer, and it doesn't extend out past 4.5 inches in measurements on the top. And I didn't realize that, and I was like, oh, well, I can't exactly cut this to 5.5 because the measurement doesn't go there. So I pulled the watercolor piece out of my trimmer, and I decided I would just mark it with a ruler. So I did bring a T-square ruler with me, and I used that to make some measurement marks on my background so that I could get it the right dimension. Another way you could do this is you could also just adhere it to your card base, and then whatever is hanging off the end, you can just cut that off with an X-Acto knife. That would also be a great way to do this. But I marked it at 5.5. There's also an A2 mark on this ruler, which is kind of nice. So if you're ever wondering what the A2 length is. So at 5.5. And then I brought it back over into my trimmer, and I lined up those 2 pencil marks right where my blade is, and then cut it off right at the right measurement. So I used some Tombow Extreme Adhesive to adhere my watercolor background onto my card base. This card base is made out of that same cardstock that I used for my greeting. It's the Neenah Classic Crest Solarite 110-pound cardstock. I used some Honeybee liquid glue behind that greeting and placed it down. And then I put some very thin foam adhesive behind that small sentiment strip and used my tweezers to apply that right below. The card was still looking a little bit unfinished to me, so I grabbed my white gel pen, which is a Gelly Roll number 10 bold, and I just added a white dashed line around the outer edge. And to me, that just makes it look a little bit more finished because, you know, I always love a really good white dash line. So there's the finished card. Like I said, I'm going to have another card that looks very similar coming up in my next video. But that is the finished card. By the way, these photos of my finished cards were taken when I returned back home. There wasn't a really great way to get a nice, a really nice photo of my cards before I left Hawaii. So the ones you're seeing are ones that I've taken at home. Thanks so much for watching today. All the supplies I used are listed down in the video description below. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in another video very soon.